Hello and welcome to everyone. My name is Teresa Blumenstein. I am the coordinator of the Justice Coalition of Religious, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this fourth session of the JCoR SDG Lab, which is our collective response to the conference that has just concluded at United Nations headquarters in New York, which is the high-level political forum on sustainable development. And in that forum, governments have the opportunity to share their progress toward the achievement of various of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And so in our sessions, we will be taking those same selected goals on which governments have been reporting as the themes for our response. So today, the theme on which we will focus is Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which is to promote justice, peace, and strong public institutions. And we will have the opportunity to hear from a wonderful panel of Catholic sisters, priests, and partners in mission who have reflected on the way that this goal is or is not being implemented in their respective countries, and who may also share some good practices that their congregations are contributing to the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal number 16. So if you look to the chat box, you will see that I have put a list of today's speakers there. And before I invite the first speaker to begin, I want to remind all that we have a team of interpreters here. And in order to enable them to convey your message clearly, please remember to speak slowly and clearly. And I will also let you know that in order to keep us on schedule as we move through the session, I will ring a bell when you have 3 minutes remaining for your time to speak. And then if you're not yet finished when your time is complete, I will ring the bell a second time. So when you hear the bell, that is the message. The first time is 3 minutes alert, and the second time is asking you to come to a conclusion. Okay, with that, I believe we are ready to truly begin. And so I would like to invite us first to hear from Sister Maricruz Trigueros, who is a member of the Society of the Sacred Heart, who will share her reflections on Mexico. Sister Maricruz?
Well, thank you, Teresa. It's a pleasure to have this moment with you this morning. And it's just, as you said, to share the reflection after the review, the voluntary review on Mexico from our own practice and experience as religious of the Sacred Heart in Mexico. So I would like to begin sharing what our government presented in the voluntary review in relation to these goals. And the effort of Mexico in this area is led by the Ministry of Economy. There is a secretariat precisely for this, for the Agenda 2030, and they prepare also the report. And there was a side event also last week in the United Nations it was to present the innovation that is several subnational and sectoral reports. So that means that there was a government report and these other reports from different sectors and groups. That was a kind of innovation, as well as the translation of the report to two Aboriginal languages that we have in our country, especially from the goals 1 and 2, where we can see that there are progresses, because as I just said, there is the Ministry of Economy who is leading that. We can see there is a poverty reduction. 5 million of Mexicans are not anymore in that situation. There was an increase of the minimum wage, and there are several social programs for priority groups, such as senior citizens, young people, rural and farming communities. So several social programs to help groups of the population. There was also a greater investment in the South that is historically disadvantaged. And that is positive, but we see, however, that there is an extreme poverty that remains at the same levels, especially among indigenous populations. And there are high levels of inequality that continue to exist in our society. With regard to the goals 13 and 16, there isn't a lot in the report, but there is a program that is Seeding Life to help rural areas, and there is also the implementation of extractivist projects and the investment in fossil fuels rather than clean energy. And with regard to 16, I think that there are elements that are missing. There is a generalized context of violence and insecurity, corruption, impunity, deficiencies, or failures in the justice system. There is a dominance of uh, drug trafficking and crime, and the consequences are a social disintegration, internal displacement, and also mistrust in institutions. Not all the institutions, but um, many of them, especially with regard to the justice system. So that is with regard to the 13 and 16, and now with regard to number 16, we had elections, and there were many people that were killed. Which is the response of our church in Mexico? The church in Mexico is trying to respond, and there is a joint effort of the bishops and the religious, mainly the Jesuits. They have an initiative for national dialogue for peace, and also conversations for peace in the parishes and other groups, in order to prepare a conference of peace and trying to advocate in order to have candidates to the government, and that they can commit to, if they are elected, they will fight for peace. That is being done in different parishes. As religious of the Sacred Heart, we have, what I want to share with you are two projects that we have, mainly with regard to popular education and alliances. We have on one hand what we call redes vecinales, or networks of neighborhoods in León, Guajanato. Those are areas of insecurity, and community murals. So the networks, the neighborhood networks, with women in the peripheries. We work in schools, public schools, and also and other networks for peace, or schools and universities and different organizations. We have a project, and the purposes is the community organization and solidarity support and peaceful coexistence. We can see the pictures of those different groups and alliances and the activities. There is a commodity sales, health fairs with doctors that help us, and community meetings. Another initiative, as I've said, the second one in Puebla, we talk about citizens on the move, and we have some murals, community murals, that different people have done in public spaces, so that everybody can see that. As you can see, that those are schools. And we try to promote the local community and the local culture through artistic expression and interdisciplinary team and network. So those are small actions in order to help to build the peace in our country, because we all want a Mexico with security and peace. Yolosiwa, it's an Aboriginal word. In order to finish, I would like to share the hopes for the future that we have. We would like to begin a new. So there was an election of the first woman president. She will begin at the end of this year, and the hope is that she can respond not only to the issue of peace and security and institutions, but also a clear gender agenda and environment. On the other hand, there is a proposal of having an increased dialogue and cooperation between the Ministry of Economy and civil society organizations. And also, at the same time, when the forum was beginning, there is an increased dialogue. And as congregation, at the same time, we are beginning with a new province as Sacred Heart with Mexico, United States, Canada, and Chile, and that will strengthen our common mission. That is at least our hope. And in order to continue our mission, that is more or less what I wanted to share with you. And later on, I will be open to questions if you wish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Maricruz. I love especially the artistic expression as an important contribution to peace in communities, as another way of communication, which is so much at the heart of peaceful coexistence and transparency. Thank you for that work and for sharing it with us. And next, I would like to invite Sister Ruth Karina Ubilas Agurto. who is a member of the School Sisters of Notre Dame and who is speaking to us about her experience in South Sudan. Sister Ruth?
Thank you, Teresa. So, good morning for all of you in United States. Good afternoon for the people in Africa. I am Karina from Peru, and I am living here in South Sudan for 4 years. So, Teresa, please, can you help me with the presentation? So as you know, South Sudan has bordering with Egypt in the north, with Ethiopia from the west, with the east, Uganda, Kenya, and Central African Republic. So for the people that you know, South Sudan is a new country who became independent since 2011. So South Sudan have 13 years of independence. So Sudan and South Sudan, they are two different countries. Before was one country, but after this, after many years of war, South Sudan became independence. Okay, please, we can move to the second slide. Okay, this is the presentation that Mr. Agustino, the National Bureau of Statistics South Sudan delegation, he present this report showing us the progress of the 16 SDG, talking about peace, justice, and strong institution. So he focused his presentation in 3 points: relative peace and recovery, South Sudan signed in 2019 a peace agreement. So in this year, yes, it is true that peace is a little bit recovery, but it's not really true that we have a really peace in the country. And the second point that he was talking about was about the women political representation in the national legislature. So it says that the women now represent the 32% of the seats in the national legislature. I think so that this is good. This is good for women that can be able to have some representation in the government. And the third point that he focused was the capacity building for national and state legislative assemblies. So I can understand that the government focused and prepared and to try to build some skills, trainings for the people involved in the government. So that 3 points was showing from the National Bureau of Statistics of South Sudan. I would like to show a little more because I am not really happy with this presentation, because the reality in South Sudan is still there is a lot of suffering. You can see here in this slide that still millions of people are displaced internally or as refugees in neighboring countries due to ongoing violence. There is no more word, but still we can see conflicts, fighting between tribes, between people, between governments, and others kind of conflicts. There is a food insecurity and economic instability. So Is this true that there is a lot of efforts to bring the country peace, but the government still are suffering with challenge, corruptions, and a fragile peace process? That this issue was not presented in the report of the minister or the person who was representing South Sudan. So South Sudan has approximately 2 million internally displaced persons. 2.3 million of its citizens have sought refuge in neighboring countries. So there is a lot of people that needed to go outside the country looking for a refuge, because here in their own country, they didn't find really a safe space to live. And since the war started in Sudan, close to 440,000 of refugees came to this country of South Sudan, and that's caused more poverty, more instability in South Sudan. So, so the situation after the war in Sudan, remember that Sudan and South Sudan, now there are two different countries. So this year, I think so from last year, the war started in Sudan. So many of these people needed to flee to another countries. Okay, this is a big reality right now. So what I was expecting from the report of this man is that to talk a little more about the human rights reality in South Sudan. Because since South Sudan became independent in 2011, still there is a lot of human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings, sexual violence, forced displacements. So it is true there is efforts to bring peace to the country, but to hold the perpetrators accountable have been limited. So human rights still is a big issue that the country need to focus from the government and for social institutions. The corruption. So it is true that we suffer in many countries in the world, but specifically here in South Sudan, really is affecting the various institutions. Yes, there is a lack of transparency and accountability from the public institutions, from the governments. So in that generates conflicts inside the country. We can move. Okay, the conditions of the prisoners is the situation that these prisoners live in is very tough, very bad. You can see in the street some prisoners working. It is true they need to do some community service, but we are not sure if they are really receiving food of a good space, of if they are living in a good conditions inside the prison. So this reality is very hard here in South Sudan. We can move. So there is an effort to address and to promote these human rights, but the establishments of justice for the people, the mechanisms that is necessary to bring justice for the people is not there. Yeah, it is necessary these commissions of peace, commission of reconciliation that in other countries helps a lot. So because after many years of war, there is a lot of pain, there is a lot of suffering, of desire of revenge in many people. So it is very important to have these commissions of reconciliation that can help the people to reunite, to do this process of really peace, an authentic peace. The legal systems and rule of law, it is very, very poor. There is a constitution here in South Sudan. That constitution says that the people are free for expression, that the people have freedom for expression. The women needed to be respected and to receive a good salary. The children need to be protected. But in the reality, these things are not happening. So you can see in the street many children, because they are neglected from the parents. The way of women is valued is terrible. Women is valued just because they need to pay the dowry if they want to be married. So, and there is a lot of situation that show us that human rights is not really respected. The dignity of the person really is not respected, is very poor, because there is no good legal systems. South Sudan have a big problem of tribalism, and this is a big issue to bring peace and justice to the people. South Sudan has 64 tribes. The biggest are Dinka and Nuer. And between these two tribes, still there is a lot of issues and conflicts. For power and to have more land and resource and these kind of things. This is affect too much the unity and peace for the country. We can move. So you can see a little bit of the faces of the different tribes in South Sudan. Yes, it's just to show you a little bit. And that tribalism came since the colonial periods, historical colonial in the colonial period. This tribalism is because there are long-standing grievances for political manipulation. Yes. I can see that in South Sudan have a weak national identity because these tribalisms don't help the people to feel as one country. The people need to work a lot in this national identity. So there is economic factors, social structure from that generates the tribalisms. What we can see that necessary step for justice and peace. We need this support in conflict resolution, mediation, to promote rule of law and accountability, human rights advocacy, disarmament and demobilization, to promote economic development. We can move. To empower women and youth, education and awareness, and international support and diplomacy. So that we can see that it's necessary to bring a better environment for justice and peace. We, as the School Sisters of Notre Dame, we are working in education. We are working with this special tribe, Nuer, but we are working with others. But this area where we are, we have a school promoting the different values that are important for the country. We have empowerment. We have this mission to empower women and youth. We have a trauma healing program because all the situation of war generates a lot of suffering, and with this program, we can help these people. This is our group of women. We motivate them to recognize their role in the society. And the last one, okay, in our mission, we promote these human rights. Okay, I think so there is no more. Sorry that I am running because time. And we are working in the refugee camps, doing their different activities and education, formation leaderships with the children, with the women and youth. I think so there is no more. Okay. That is.
Thank you very much, Sister Ruth, and so wonderful to see all those beautiful faces in the midst of all of the challenges that you have presented to us and all of the good work that the school sisters are doing in response. Thank you for that sharing, and we will have those slides available on our website too. So if anyone wants to go back to study more of the details, that will be available to you.
Okay.
And now we will go next to hear from Father Norbe Tapiero, who is a Claretian missionary and who will speak to us about the experience in Colombia. Father Norbe?
Good morning, everybody from Colombia. I am in Medellin now. It's a context that has been affected by violence, and we still have the consequences of violence. We are in La Diario, the Claretians are working there. Please, if you can share the presentation. As an introduction, Colombia has been one of the countries where violence has been very strong, but also we had the process of peace. The reality in Colombia in relation to the goals is complex, and especially this 16 is complex, and as the country has made significant progress, but also faces important challenges. We have had many, many years of violence, and also that makes violence structural violence. Next slide, please. During that time, now we are having a new government, President Petro, who has been in charge for 2 years. The previous governments were trying to promote the conflict and armed conflict and favored displacement and different kinds of violence. And that's why we had many years of violence and internal conflict. So from the report, we could see that we are trying to reach peace in Colombia. First, we have to remember that there was a peace agreement between the FARC and the Colombian government in 2016. That was the time of President Santos, the signing of the peace agreement between the Colombian government and the FARC in 2016. That was an important milestone, and this agreement has allowed the demobilization of thousands of former fighters and the implementation of reintegration and rural development program. So this agreement improved the situation with regard to conflict from that time. Even with all the problems that we have had, the right governments didn't agree with peace because of many interests, and so there was a government that tried to go back, but we still have this agreement. Second, it was talked about an institutional strengthening, the efforts that have been made to strengthen the government institutions and improve transparency and accountability, which includes the creation of mechanisms to fight against corruption and improve the effectiveness of the judicial system. Because corruption, it's an important problem for us. A third challenge is the citizen participation. There is a greater focus on citizen participation and the inclusion of different groups in decision-making processes, so that all are involved in this process to promote peace and human rights. So there are local initiatives in promotion of human rights, denunciation before international organizations. In other words, civil society is involved in participation in peace processes in the territories. And we try to put pressure so in order to finish with this through the citizen participation. Now in the area, Lariare, where I am, we try to work with the civil society so that they are involved in this participation. Even there are new groups that we are not involved in the peace agreement, but now are involved. And fourth, there is a beginning of peace talks with the ELN and the EMC and other actors or groups. This is what the present government is trying to do, but it's still a challenge. But it's true that has lowered the level of violence in the territory where these groups are present. And the challenges that we have in Colombia, one is the total peace or complete peace. That is one of Petro's government's bets and has been the search for peace with different armed groups and criminal structures. Because there are different groups, and in the cities and in the rural areas, and that is a challenge for this government, Petro's government. And that is to lower at least the level of violence, even if the media are manipulated And it's easier to sell violence than to sell peace. But it is true that it has lowered the level of violence. As I've said, despite the peace agreement, Colombia continues to have levels of violence. But the government is involved in trying to have dialogue with the different groups. There are illegal armed groups, extortion, traffic of drugs, illegal mining, and that continues to be a problem and to affect security and peace in the country. Deaths have decreased, but insecurity has increased in some areas. In the territories, people demand social investment and not militarization. So people are asking social investment to have roads or other structures. Many times the response of the government was just to have a presence of security and only that. And then corruption, that remains an obstacle. Although reforms have been implemented, the perception of corruption remains high. And this is, yes, a challenge, the corruption, because it comes from a long time ago. And then the third, justice and human rights. There are challenges in access to justice, especially for rural and marginalized communities. And the protection of human rights, including the rights of social and environmental leaders, that is a constant concern, as many of them face threats and violence. In 2023, there were 181 social leaders and human rights defenders that were murdered, according to the Ombudsman's Office. And we have there also the statistics on the evolution of violence and the murders in 2023 and previous years. So we have there 2023 and then below 2016 to 2023. Yeah, next, okay. Another challenge, it is the internal displacement that we have. We continue to have internal displacement in the territories where we have armed groups. Millions of Colombian people have been displaced by the armed conflicts, and many have not yet been able to return to their homes. Where we are, as Claretians, there were 4,000 people that were displaced, and 30% only could go back. So the rural areas have very few people. And a fifth challenge is implementation of the peace agreement. That continues to be the challenge. And in the United Nations, it was talked a lot about that, the implementation of the peace agreement. But that includes challenges, including adequate funding, interinstitutional coordination, and resistance from some sectors that are not committed to peace with justice. There are some political groups that really want to put into practice the peace agreement, and others don't, because there are other issues involved, like giving the land to the rural areas. So there are groups that are against the peace agreement. In conclusion, Colombia has made important progress with regard to this goal, especially through the peace agreement and the efforts to strengthen institutions. However, persistent violence, corruption, and human rights problems remain as significant obstacles. Effective and sustained implementation of policies that promote peace, justice, and inclusion is crucial to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 16 in Colombia. And this is very important to accompany this process. What we have done as Claretian missionaries in Colombia, where we are, and in the areas where we are, one is the peace promotion, trying to accompany the civilian organizations in the advocacy of territorial peace processes and training in what we call the Week for Peace. This action contributes to Goal 1 of Objective 16 to contribute to the significant reduction of all forms of violence experienced in some regions of Colombia. For us, it is very important to accompany as religious to the population so that they feel that we are with them and they engage in the peace dialogue. Because they need security and peace. Next one. Next one, please. Okay. We accompany also the groups that are searching for people missing due to the armed conflict. And we had the peace agreement, but at the same time, we have to fight with people in order to find the missing people. And we accompany the groups or the relatives of missing persons. And with regard to human rights, we work in order to make visible the denunciation of human rights violations. We denounce through public communications with other social organizations, analysis of the reality of human rights, and another action is the pilgrimage in memory of the peasant or farmers martyrs of Alto Ariari, so that people know what has happened and the places, etc. And we try to accompany the victims and to keep alive their hope and faith. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Norbe. And you have given a good illustration of the challenges of La Paz Total, in that it is the work of everyone coming together and being very invested and committed together. So thank you for the ways that Claretians are committing to peace in Colombia. And next, we will have the pleasure of hearing from another member of the Claretian family, Mr. Rafael Villalobos Segura, who is a partner of the Claretians in Costa Rica, and we will hear from him via a recorded presentation.
We see this in our countries. We see that there is a structural violence. There are structural situations that are in themselves violent. And this disaffection provoked by social inequalities, poverty, colonialism, injustice, among others, produce in daily life violations of dignity and human rights in social sectors and power structures and practices that often manifest in acts of violence against human beings. A report on the reality of poverty and violence in Central America on drugs that was done by the United Nations defines this area as the deadliest region of the world, where 1 out of every 50 men will be killed before the age of 31 years old. So these are alarming and painful realities, and this objective seeks to make a change and transform these painful and violent realities that we live in our countries, with clear goals and ambitious goals, such as reducing all forms of violence, to eradicate child abuse and exploitation, to strengthen the rule of law, to reduce the financial and armed flows, a reduction in corruption, etc. What do I think as a believer? I think that is vital, first of all, not to lose sensitivity to these realities of pain. We cannot be indifferent. So I present these images of Don Danilo, Doña Juanita, with their 2 boys from a rural community here in Costa Rica, the mountains of lemon trees. The lady, when she was pregnant, she worked in a banana plantation. And at that time, the fumigation machines were worked with by plane without taking care of people, because the interest is always the economic interest. And she was affected by those insecticides. And the boys were born blind. The other image that we witness all the time of thousands of migrants fleeing the realities of pain they live in their countries, crossing the Darien jungle. So the question for the church is, can we stay silent, locked in the sacristy, as many want us to be? And they ask to the church to stay quiet. And the Pope tells us that it's very clear that the proposal of the gospel, it is not only to have a personal relationship with God. It is not a la carte charity. The proposal is the kingdom of God. It is about loving God who reigns in the world. And to the extent that he reigns, then our social life will be an environment of fraternity, justice, peace, dignity for all. Here in the left, we have Father Eric, a Claretian missionary in the area of Darien, together with the brothers, welcoming thousands of migrants with very painful stories. The family on the left came with the child on the right, Angelo. The father was telling us how in the middle of the jungle there are gangs that charge and dispute the territories. And there was a gunfight that broke out, and a bullet hit Angelo in his head and killed him. And Pope Francis continues to tell us that the dignity of every human being and the common good are issues that should structure our life. But there are many words that are annoying for this system to speak about: ethics, world solidarity, distribution of goods, to keep the sources of work. It bothers to talk about the dignity of the weak, sorry. It is disturbing to speak about a God who asks us for justice. And he stresses, as long as the problems of the poor are not radically solved and the autonomy of markets and speculation stays as such, the world's problems will not be solved, because inequity is the root of all social problems and ills. We can see this shopping mall, beautiful, and just few meters away, people who do not have the minimum to live. These apartments, beautiful apartments, and 500 meters away, these are the reality. So as believers, we are invited, in the face of this culture of discarding, we have to promote a culture of welcoming the vulnerability of our human condition. Leads us to welcome the needy and not to be indifferent to this great pain. And the prophet tells us justice will produce peace, tranquility, justice forever. And Pope Francis insists on the dignity of the human person and the common good. And that is beyond everything. And that is very important. Sometimes we have lost in our church that prophetic voice. We are afraid of denounce. And the Pope continues saying that a peace that does not come as the fruit of the integral development will have no future. Sometimes we want peace, but we are not able to work for justice and peace. As the prophet says, justice will produce peace. If we don't have justice, we will not have peace. So it is vital that there is a dialogue, a social dialogue, as contribution to the peace. In Fratelli Tutti, the Pope tells us that the culture of encounter is not to think, live, or react in the same way, but to know that beyond our difference, we are united in something that transcends us, our common home. And this fraternal closeness, we discover that it's in order to overcome the condition of poverty of those who are most in need, and that they can perceive us as brothers and sisters who care about them and who open the door of our hearts and life. And that is the journey, should be the journey of the church. And that is why it is vital to know how to design in a culture that promotes dialogue as a form of encounter and the search of consensus and agreements, but without separating that from justice. The main author of this process should be everybody, not just a class or a group. We do not need a project of a few or an enlightened minority. What we need is an agreement to live together, a social and cultural agreement. And a very interesting we have in Costa Rica are tables of social dialogue. The parish priests convoke the different groups and actors of the community about our problems in order to find a solution. So at the same level sits the pastor, the doctor, the teacher, the one who is in charge of security, the civil associations, and they talk about the problems that exist and how to go ahead and how to find solutions for water problems or road infrastructures or farmers, entrepreneurships, or situations of violence that we live in these communities. So it is vital to have a capacity to sit down and dialogue. Unfortunately, we have not been educated for dialogue. We have been educated for rejections or devalue the opinion of others, and we see that in our church. Unfortunately, when we should rather be signs of encounter, dialogue, and searching for solutions for the problems that we experience in our society. So I repeat, for me, it is vital that if we want to build a society that seeks the common good, we shouldn't be indifferent to these realities of pain and not be a church that is closed in itself, but that discovers it herself a servant of the kingdom. And this make us capable and able of being attentive to many realities such as those of the migrants who have to cross the Darien jungle. This was a recent visit that we had in that area where every day 3,000 of migrants arrive from many countries.
We conclude there with Raphael, but I will put into the chat box a link to his full presentation for those who are interested in hearing a little bit more from him. And there I appreciate very much his prophetic voice in relation to the value of social dialogue for peace in the church and beyond, and the important role that that plays, which is a theme we are hearing from multiple presentations today. So now we will hear next from Sister Josephine Kamau, who is a member of the Daughters of Mary, and she will be speaking to us from her experience in Uganda. Sister Josephine? Thank you very, very much, Sister Josephine. And as with our other presentations, we will be happy to share the full detail of her document on our website so that you can return to it and continue to study what she is sharing with us. I am especially appreciative of the component you have brought forth about how it is essential to have a culture of peace. And in fact, that there's so much work to creating and shaping and nurturing culture. And that peace is one aspect of that culture to shape what is normal for people. And it's very encouraging to see the way that religious are involved at the John Paul II Justice and Peace Center and other places to help nurture that culture of peace. Thank you very much for that sharing. And we will hear next from Father Joaquin Bejar Alvarado, who is a Claretian missionary, originally from Spain, but now serving quite a few years in Zimbabwe. So he will be speaking to us about his experience in Zimbabwe. Father Joaquin? Thank you very much, Joaquin. And so we can add to the elements of culture that we are called to infuse or to shape. We had, culture of peace, culture of dialogue, and now we can add culture of participation. And as you mentioned, there are important factors to support that, allowing for familiarity and literacy in the process of participation. So thank you to you and all who participated in that election observation and in encouraging participation and peace among all the participants. Such great work. And now, finally, we will hear from our final speaker for today, Sister Melba Vasquez Rodriguez, who is a member of the Congregation of Notre Dame de Montreal. And she will share with us her analysis and experience from Honduras. Sister Melba.
Could you please share the screen, Teresa? So to begin, I am impressed after all the what has been shared today. I don't have anything to say, I think, because the analysis from Latin America, I think that is very similar. Continue the slides. Okay. So now we will hear a song that will be like a background of what we are going to present. In my country, Wemil and burning sun, you see history in the faces of people, beautiful land, light of a seagull. You have the light that distributes life. You are the seed, and you are the strength in the plow. You have your soul in the bustle of the market. Let the guitar and the marimba sound, the maracas with the accordion. Let the flute and the caramba sound, the drum and the snail sound. In my country, there is the sound of the sea, jungle and ravine. There is the flavor of orange and guava. There is the color of the flower that does not wither. There is the smell of coffee in the afternoon. Okay. Okay, we will continue. So, I want to talk about the general situation of Honduras, what we have seen in the report of the government, the National Voluntary Review, the general information, the state commitments, etc. So we will begin with the general information. Honduras has an area of 112,000 kilometers The capital is Tegucigalpa. It's the 101st economy in the world. We can see that we have a public debt of 1,426 per capita. That was the latest annual valuation. We will continue. As we can see, there are many contrasts in our country. In the past, there are many contrasts. There are resources and also violation of human rights and the lack of opportunity for people. Continue. Next. As I said, the GDP is as you can see, per person, 3.36. So those are levels so Honduras has a very bad quality of life. We will continue. The index of perception of corruption in the public sector is 23 points. There are countries that have 66. But anyway, this is very high in Latin America. Next one. We have a persistent and profound multi-crisis. There was a coup d'etat and there were many conflicts, political conflicts, and we don't have a rule of law, and we have structural problems that need to have a response. Continue. In the report that was presented, and it's intended to be like a political transition in order to leave the different practices that led to that situation, and also the hurricanes that we had in addition to external factors, and the response that the government want to give. Next one. I will try to hurry up. Taking into account all these, we are a bit late in putting into practice the SDG, because we really don't like the rule of law. We are trying to rebuild our society. Probably you have heard the news, and that has an impact on our situation, and the program of the United Nations for Development is saying that we don't have a situation of security. Next one. The president says that we are changing towards a democratic socialist model. At least if we could respect the primary rights of people, that would be good. Next one, please. When we see this goal, it describes what we don't have. When it was impressive for me when I read it, because it was like a description of what we don't have in our country: reducing violence and related deaths. Somebody asked in the chat why we talked about structural violence that is structural, because there are structures of power that promote violence. And in order to keep us in that cycle, that's why we have to promote the rule of law in order to have justice. And somebody says that we cannot have peace if we don't have justice. Next one. Here we have the 10 state commitments that are the heart of the entire voluntary national review. But we have to continue reducing poverty, establishing a system for food, etc., improving public health, etc. We had different hurricanes, and that's why our country was really suffered a lot from that, and also the pandemic. So we went back, and how to build again, we need the commitment of the state and the government. Next one, please. Next one. This is important because most of the population is young, and they are leaving the country. 67.3 is under 30 years of age, and 53% lives in urban area. 42% of the homes have heads of households under 40 years of age, and the expectancy of life is 69 years old. The men are head of household, and we have to see how to improve the situation of women. Next one. The economy, as we said, in Honduras, poverty now is on 33.6 and 57 in extreme poverty. Next one. Continue. The populations, the vulnerable populations, the Garifuna peoples, elderly people, the Mosquitia, okay, women and girls. So those are people in vulnerable conditions, where the rights are violated, that every time that there is a claim, people suffer of injustice. And we have been called by the United Nations to respect human rights. Also to respect the cultural patrimony. You know how some activists have been killed, and so you don't have to say anything so that the system can continue. Next one. Here we have some Garifuna people. The government, next one. the government is saying that there isn't the adequate regulation of private business activities, and that has affected the exercise of human rights because the businesses want to take the lands, the rivers, and so to use them. And that means to lose our culture and our way of life and our means of life. Next one. Another indicator is gender. Gender violence. It's terrible to see the femicides in 2021, 2022. Honduras had the highest rate of femicides in the region. Next one. The human mobility is an important factor. The Claretian talked about that. The father talked about that. And Honduras is a place where people go through. We have 135 nationalities of people going to the north in a situation of mobility. In 2023 we had the highest number of irregular entries. It's like more than 500,000 people in migratory movement. Next one, please. In 2023, there was a decrease in the number of people from our country that returned. But that people who are abroad, that means also that they are suffering. We have to see Honduras is a country with different aspects. It's a country of origin, entry, and transit. Next one, please. General remarks. To reduce poverty and extreme poverty, it is essential a combination of measures to increase economic growth and reduce inequality in income distribution. The leading role of local actors. We can see that this report was made from other reports, but we have to improve that. It's not finished. We need more dialogue, more consultation in order to go to the root of the problems. And we have to go to a transition to full democracy. And the government is saying that we have to commit to strengthening resilience to extreme events and climate change impact. Next one, please. In order to achieve the 2030 agenda, Honduras will have to continue betting on a strategic plan. As we say, a social alliance with all the different agents of the society, the civil society, the church, with a common will, a political will too. Now we are already in political campaign, but that is to search power and not to serve. And the question is why most of young people have to leave the country in order to have a future. And we we say that the young people with a degree have to leave the country. As we say, there is a brain drain. There is an atmosphere of violence and instability. The struggle for the rights of the indigenous people, the Afro-descendants and working class populations continues. Next. In order to achieve the goal 16 of the 2030 agenda, the state will have to continue to be strengthened because we have a level of corruption that is very high and people don't believe even in the church. The church was very credible, but there were events of corruption inside the church, and in consequence, even the church is not credible. We have to recover that. To implement the national transparency and anti-corruption strategy of Honduras at all levels. When the president began, she wanted to have a commission, an anti-corruption commission. She promised that, but she hasn't begun yet. And so, to finish, we as congregation, we want to leave this opportunity to live in dialogue with people in order to reach justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melba, and you have echoed a lot of the components of peace and justice and security that have come through in all of the sharing today. And I think we are left with questions of how do we imagine together and shape together societies with a vision for a new vision of security or inclusion, integration, stability, participation, all of which are ingredients of peace. Well, thank you all very much for your sharing, and we hope you will join us again tomorrow for the next session of this lab, which will be dedicated to Sustainable Development Goal number 17, which is partnerships and resources to support sustainable development. Thank you all very much for being here. Thanks to our interpreters, and we hope to see you at the same time tomorrow.
Yes. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. This was quite enriching.
You're joining us. Yeah.